Welcome back to the new Dead Last, the show where we rank all of your favorite horror films. And for this episode, we wanted to highlight not a particular franchise, not a particular theme, but a particular director. And that director is the amazing David Cronenberg. He is extremely influential in the genre and recently made a return visit to body horror just this year. So we're going to check out the early part of his career, strictly the more horror and sci-fi entries, and here are the films that we decided to include. So I sent this roster of movies to my patrons, and these are the guys that answered the call, sending their rankings with their favorite of the bunch at number 1, worth 1 point, and their least favorite at dead last, here worth 11 points. And here today to help me go through these rankings from the film with the most points down to the least is the inventor of HalloweenShindig.com, as well as the host of the companion podcast Shindig Radio. Let's welcome Derek back to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Josh. It's a new format, but we did the dead last from season 1 in this format. So
yeah,
I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to do this intimate sort of version of Dead Last. I think I can hang.
Oh, I don't doubt that you'll not only hang, but you'll swing.
I couldn't turn down doing a Cronenberg Dead Last.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, why would you? These are all solid films, and even our bottom entries are pretty awesome. So let's go find out what they are. So for this episode, I received 24 rankings, which means that the highest possible score that a movie could have would be 264 points. And the best possible score, if every single person ranked a movie at number 1, would be 11 points. So with that in mind, our dead last for this episode, coming in at 204 points, is his early film, Rabid. This one was ranked dead last 4 times, and the best spot that it achieved was 3rd place. And hey, you and I were pretty split here because I had this one in dead last.
You gave Rabid dead last?
I did because here's the thing. I really like this movie. I dare say that it is the finest film about a woman with a vagina in her armpit that grows into a spiky penis that turns you into a zombie. And it's cool. It's got all of the Cronenberg trademarks that I want to see. But after watching this one back to back with Shivers, it became clear to me about halfway through that this is almost like an elaboration of the same story. It starts to almost feel like a remake at times, and it has several similar situations, and it's kind of covering the same themes. And to Cronenberg's credit, you would think that this would make this feel stale. But it really doesn't, because it's got a certain polish to it that's nice to see. But the one thing that just starts to bring it down is Marilyn Chambers. One of the downsides of this one is that it really lacks in its characters, so you kind of need a strong female lead to pull off this character that can be pretty complex and tragic. And in a way, she's as much a victim of the science as Seth Brundle is, but her performance just doesn't hit those notes, and she's just not selling this character. And all in all, though, this is still a really good film in dead last.
I mean, that was the thing, right? Where you just go like, I felt bad putting any of these movies on dead last. I think this is the first, and I don't know how many episodes I've actually been on, but this is the first time that I like every movie on this list, legitimately. This is the Cronenberg I want. I want the Cronenberg that feels gritty and raw and 70s, and it looks like Canada, and it just feels weird. And it's unpolished. I like Marilyn Chambers. I mean, it's not a great performance, but I think she does a good job in that role, as just, kind of being a vessel. The ending of Rabid is just so bleak. Like, right, she's just thrown out. She's lying on the side of an alley next to a dumpster, and they just like pick her up and then just hoist her away, and they're just moving on. It's got that real Night of the Living Dead sort of feel to the ending. And that's what I want from a David Cronenberg film. I want to not feel good about this right now. And Rabid is a great example of that.
Now we're headed on to our number 10 movie, and it was a pretty close race here because it's only 6 points lower than our dead last film, and at 198 points, it's Crash. This actually got the most dead last ranking since it was put there 9 times, but it got some higher scores too, with its highest ranking being number 1, which it got 1 time. You and I were not so favorable here because I had this one in 9th place. Although again, this is a film that I kind of like. I get why people don't like it, but I just got stuck somewhere in the middle because this is a movie that is mainly about 2 things: car crashes and kinky sex. And when you say that, you go, oh, that's for me. But then it just gives you those 2 things in the most sterile and pedestrian way possible, and it almost becomes an exercise in be careful what you wish for. And yeah, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how something could be equally fascinating and dull at the same time, because the biggest issue is the total lack of any narrative drive. It's just a group of people wandering around for a while, exploring their fetishes, which sounds pretty enticing, but when it plays out in this super serious styling, it just falls flat. And hey, speaking of falling flat, you put this one in dead last.
I did.
Yeah.
I did have Crash at dead last. Crash is just the least interesting to me, I guess. It's suitably weird. It is it's a well-made film. I think there's a lot of good acting in Crash. I think there's some really interesting and strange, very Cronenberg things happening. Just on the whole, it's the one I'm least interested in, and the one I don't, I never grab Crash and throw Crash on. I just Crash. It's fine. I mean, if I had to pick one, that was like, out of these 11 movies, if there's one movie you don't want to I was like, okay, Crash. That's the
Moving up now, let's check out our number 9 entry, which again was a really tight race. This was going to be number 10, but the very last ranking that I received bumped it up a few points to grab the number 9 spot, and with 196 points, it's Shivers. This one was ranked dead last 5 times, and the best ranking that it received was 4th place, which it got twice. I had this one a little lower myself because I put it as my number 10, and I definitely think that this is Cronenberg at his most rudimentary, but I will say that even here, you can start to see his themes emerge. You got guys poking around at their own abdomens, weird phallic intestinal looking creatures, and just an overwhelmingly rampant horniness. And even this early on, you can see those seeds being planted, and for such an early work, it's pretty well realized. It's clearly limited by its budget, and some of the special effects seem a bit dated and almost silly, but it just does such a good job of maintaining this sense of dread all throughout. And since it's a different type of zombie, one who assaults you instead of eats you, it's completely different type of tension. Now, Derek, you've got this much higher than me, though. You have this in 6th place, so you have some appreciation for Shivers.
Yeah, I think it's more of that. His early career and his themes, to me, just go together better. The lower the budget, the more schlocky the plot, and with Cronenberg, I don't know, he elevates even schlock to like a different. Like I could see Shivers being made by some other director, no-name director, and you're just watching some, normal B movie that just kind of feels like whatever, but you're watching a David Cronenberg movie, and it's weird. You got Barbara Steele. Come on now, I can't. That's great. That last sequence, and that's the other thing too. The ending of Shivers is just great. Like the guy just, he's fighting this for at least the last, half hour of the movie. I mean, he can't get away from this damn slug thing, and he just finally just winds up in that swimming pool there. Wow, you never feel good, right? Like, you never feel good at the end of a Cronenberg movie. I love Shivers. Come on.
So we now go to our number 8 movie, and this was our first slightly bigger drop in points because we shoot down to 175 points, and it's Existence. This one did get 2 dead last nods, but it did get ranked in second place one time, and you and I were pretty similar with this one. I had this one a little lower at number 8, and this is one that I had a really hard time placing because there's quite a bit that I like about this one. The story is pretty fantastic, and the way that it messes with your concept of reality and trying to break down exactly what level of reality that these characters are currently on is pretty fun. That said, this one has a weird dichotomy going on because there's things that I don't like about it, but as it turns out, all of those things are completely justified by the plot. I'm kind of put off by some of the performances because they seem slightly stilted and like off. And then there's those accents, like Jude Law's American accent is really wonky. And then there's whatever Christopher Eccleston is attempting here.
For our test launch of Existence by Antenna, we have brought you a seminar leader who is rather special.
There's also something really unusual about the way that it looks, and it's probably Cronenberg's glossiest movie, and it works against it because it feels kind of like a TV movie. But here's the thing. All of that stuff is justified by the ending. The whole nature of the game reality makes all of these things aesthetic choices, so it's clear that there's basically an explanation for all of it, but that still doesn't make those things not kind of annoying to me. So even though I get it, I see what they're doing, I just still have a little bit of a hard time with it. So it gets bumped a little lower. And you're probably in a similar boat because you've got it 9th.
I love Existence, and I felt bad when I looked at my list and I was just like, really? Like, I guess I just like these other movies more than Existence. But come on, man, that movie's cool, right? He's got a bone gun that he rips apart out of a mutant reptile. You know, he takes the bridge of his teeth out, he shoves it in that bone gun, he's just like blasting a waiter in the face with teeth. Like, come on, man, that's about as Cronenberg as you can get outside of, I don't know, maybe fingering a weird vagina in Jude Law's back. I think that probably it's a little bit more Cronenberg than that. Willem Dafoe's great. Jude Law's good. Jennifer Jason Leigh is good. Like, if you watch an Existence, you're not going to have a bad time. If you're into, that kind of sci-fi or it's not super actiony, but it has its moments. But if you're just into weird stuff, man, like Existence is a good ride for that.
Speaking of rides, let's take a ride to number 7, which dropped down quite a bit, going down to 162 points here. And it's one that's gonna bum both of us out by being in 7th place, and it's The Brood. Now, this is the first movie on the list to not get a dead last ranking, and the worst score that it got was 10th place, which it got 3 times, but it did get one number 1 spot, and that number 1 ranking came from you, sir.
What can I say? That's my favorite David Cronenberg movie. It was not the first David Cronenberg movie I ever saw, but it was certainly the one that made me love David Cronenberg and made me just absorb the rest of it. And I don't even know if I can really pinpoint what it is that I love so much about The Brood. I don't know if it's just the weird kids and their hoodies, if it's because they're freaky, man. Like, there's a lot of freaky stuff in a lot of Cronenberg movies and a lot of other horror movies, but I'm not generally scared by like little kids. Like, I don't know, they don't freak me out really, but like there's something about those little monster kids and their weird, primary color hoodies. I don't know, it's just the way that Cronenberg shoots it, but it's just something about the vibe of that movie that I love. I love Oliver Reed, and I watch it anytime. I love The Brood. I have my Brood shirt here that I was gonna wear to like give it away. I'll give away my dead last or my number 1, but it's so old. The armpits all ripped out. I didn't want you guys to have to watch that the whole episode, but I love The Brood. It's my number 1.
Well, I didn't quite have it as my number 1, but I had it pretty high up there at number 4 because I really, really like this movie.
For me, this is where the man clicks. This just feels like so much more of a fully formed work. The themes come through more, and he seems to be more confident with his storytelling. You're not getting sex-starved Cronenberg here. You're getting real-life mad at his actual ex-wife Cronenberg. And I think that works in his favor, because I think previously he may have been exploring themes that he was interested in, and this sort of personal interest that he had. But I think that this is the first one he seems really invested in and has this like personal passion for. Also, this one just has a bit of nostalgia for me because I think it was the first of his that I saw, and it might have been on regular TV in some like super heavily edited version, but I saw it pretty early on and it just really stuck with me. So, I have to give it a little bit more oomph just based on that. Here we go now with another decent drop in number of points as we head to number 6 with 147 points, and this is another one that I was really curious how people were going to rate it, and it's Dead Ringers. This film was also never ranked dead last, but did get a pair of 10th place spots, but like The Brood, it also got one number 1 pick. I've got this one as my number 6, which is where it landed, and I think right in the middle is a good place for it, and this is a tough one to try to place, because here's the thing. I hesitated about even putting this one on here since I was trying to stick to things that I would consider as genre. And this is mostly a drama, but go figure, yeah, it belongs here. I mean, who would figure that if someone gave you the description for this one and said, oh, it's just this little dramatic film about twins who are sleeping with women and not telling them that they're twins and they develop drug habits, and it sounds somewhat soap opera. But it turns out that it's one of the most off-putting films on this list. There's just something disturbing, deep-rooted in this one. It just fills every scene, and even though the subject matter doesn't seem like it should unsettle you, it does. Plus, it's great to watch this level of trickery with the twin stuff in a pre-CGI world, and you never once question it. It's seamless. You actually had this a little higher than I thought you would. You had this in 4th place.
Dude, there's a version of this list where it's my number 1 pick. I mean, for a long time, this was my favorite David Cronenberg movie. I love Dead Ringers. Dead Ringers is an unsettling, weird, antiseptic, clinical, off-putting, perfectly David Cronenberg movie. And Jeremy Irons is fantastic in this role. He does that kind of like soap opera, like evil brother thing, but he does it in such a real way where you feel as though he is 2 separate characters, even when they're on screen. And you're watching, you're like, I know who Jeremy Irons is. I know there aren't 2 of them, but in this scene right now, that it just works. And what a weird just story about these 2 twins. Kind of like, it's the David Cronenberg's The Parent Trap. And doesn't that sound weird? And yeah, it is. Like I said, there's a version of this list where it's my number 1. And if we had done this video, I don't know, 5 years ago, I probably would have put Dead Ringers at number 1. I love Dead Ringers. This is such a good movie.
Jumping up into the top half of this list now, and we're getting into the heavy hitters as we're looking at number 5 here with 142 points. And this is the one that a lot of people were split on, including us, and it's Naked Lunch. It's actually got 2 dead last rankings, but also 1 number 1 ranking, and plenty in between. And I gave this a pretty high ranking because this was my number 3, and I have a special love for this one because when it came out, like a lot of other wannabe writers at the time, I was pretty into William S. Burroughs. So when this came out, I was pretty psyched. And this does something amazing in that it manages to really feel like Burroughs, but yet it also feels like Cronenberg. It's like this perfect mixture of the two, but then it does this whole other thing. Not only does it adapt the book of Naked Lunch, but then it sort of becomes this biofilm of Burroughs' life, and it just does all of that so well, and I find it really fascinating. But now it seems like you found this less fascinating than me, though, since you had this one all the way down in 10th place.
I love the creature stuff that's going on in Naked Lunch. I think Naked Lunch looks awesome. Peter Weller is fantastic in Naked Lunch. Like just his sort of like matter-of-fact reaction to all the crazy that's going on in Naked Lunch is great, and just watching him kind of play off of all of that. And like I said, the effects are kind of mind-blowing. Like, right, there's a lot of great creature effects going on, but when you start talking about these movies, like we were saying the other day, it's like, what do you base it on, right? Like, well, okay, at some point you just have to go like, I like all of these movies, so what do I base it on? And I based this one basically on how much do I want to rewatch Naked Lunch? How much do I want to throw on Naked Lunch? And it's kind of goofy, but I do like Naked Lunch. I don't think you can be into horror, creature effects, or sci-fi and not enjoy Naked Lunch. But just at the end of the day, I want to watch The Brood. I don't want to watch Naked Lunch. Put it back there.
Going on now to our number 4 movie, and this was a pretty big drop down in points because we jump all the way to 119, which is a pretty big drop from 142, and it's Scanners. This one actually did get 1 dead last vote and got 2 number 1 votes, making it the first entry on our list to get more than 1 number 1 pick. I gave this one my 5th place spot, and let's face it, that head pop is easily one of the most iconic and surprising moments in horror. It's just so out of left field and completely wild. If you've never seen this movie with someone who doesn't know what to expect, just put it on and watch their reaction. And do you know how many times I have seen this movie? And this is the first time that I have realized that the good doctor is Patrick McGoohan. I say this as a fan of The Prisoner and someone that has been familiar with McGoohan for a while and had seen this movie after that fact and still didn't realize it until right now. He is unrecognizable. This has a great story with some really distinct story notes, but I'm really thrown off by the whole computers can be scanned because they have a nervous system thing. And I also wish the plot was a bit more consistent since this movie just kind of goes from set piece to set piece. And that ending is amazing though. Now, I have to say, you have this in 7th place, and I had predicted that you'd have this one higher.
Really?
Yeah.
Again, right? It's this list. I like that the things I like about Scanners is this is coming right off of that era of Cronenberg that I really love. But you kind of give him a bigger budget and you sort of strip away any of that weird psychosexual stuff that's going on with his earlier film career. And he gives you pretty much a straightforward kind of sci-fi action movie. And I think it's, in that sense, it's a little generic, I guess, for lack of a better word. Yeah, Michael Ironsides is great. I cannot say the same about the guy who's plays Cameron Vale.
I don't even know his
name.
name.
But it just kind of feels like if David Cronenberg had made X-Men. I don't know. I don't know that he needs to direct this movie, and I don't know that it feels like, you know, his hand is firmly kind of just on it.
And we move on now.
Man, I kept thinking this all week. I was like, dude, who's that guy? The Cronenberg guy.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I had the same thought. I looked it up. It's Robert A. Silverstein.
Dude, because that guy's great. And we didn't mention him in The Brood, and I feel bad about it because he's awesome. That's my favorite performance of his, the guy in The Brood that's just kind of like tweaking out, but he's great here in Scanners too. He's just like living inside that cool like head sculpture. I love all his little performances in Cronenberg movies. I wish he was in every Cronenberg movie. I kind of like guessing who he would have been in a Cronenberg movie.
Well, that's the funny thing, because he's pretty much in all of these films up until Existence, but then he, I guess, just stopped using him after that. So I don't know what happened. I don't know if they had a falling out or what, but he still occasionally acts in like just random other things.
Gotta mention him. Can't not mention that guy.
Going on now to the top 3, and I want to say that there was a pretty tight race for the first here. This was a closer competition than I thought. In the early days of getting the rankings, it was unclear what was going to be number 1. But as more and more came in, it became a little bit more obvious. But this one did way better than I was expecting, because at number 3 with 102 points, it's The Dead Zone. Now, this is one of the very few films to be featured on more than one episode of Dead Last, and we covered this way back in the first Stephen King episode, and here, the lowest score that it got was 9th place, but it did get the top spot 4 times. Now, we both gave this lower than the consensus, and I gave it 7th place, and for me, this one is the one that just doesn't fit in with the rest of his catalog. When I talked about Naked Lunch, I mentioned how it was a perfect merger between his personal style and Burroughs, and well, I don't feel like that was the case here. This feels way more like a Stephen King movie than a David Cronenberg one. You get hardly any of the director's trademarks, and it feels more like a work for hire job for me. Like Cronenberg came in and said, "Oh, you want to give me a bunch of money to do this? Sure, here you go. Now give me money to make the kind of thing that I want to do, okay?" But that being said, it's a really good movie. There's nothing about it that brings it down. It's got great characters and an interesting narrative, but at the end of the day, as I'm ranking these, that's gonna knock it down a few pegs beyond the ones that I feel are more of his trademark style. Now, Derek, you've got this in a similar position, but even slightly lower in 8th place.
Don't get me wrong. I love the Dead Zone, and what did I have it in like 3rd place on the Stephen King Dead Last? Like, I love the Dead Zone, and I love that David Cronenberg adapted a Stephen King novel, and that it's as good as the Dead Zone is. Like, what an atmosphere David Cronenberg creates in that film. Like, it's a movie I could throw on and just kind of watch and just kind of be in it. But he's at his most pure when he's just giving you his brand of crazy. And when you're just kind of taking, another story and letting him kind of go with it, it just lacks a little something that makes me put it, lower on the list, but only because of those other movies, right? Like, it just has kind of like a somber, sort of sad tone to it that I really like, and it sort of feels Cronenberg-y in that way. But yeah, and when it came to this list, I just couldn't do it, man. It's like, how is that? It was one of the ones where I was like, how is the Dead Zone this low? What? But it was.
Okay, it's getting tight now. Not a lot of movies left. And at number 2 here, coming in with 77 points, it's the classic Videodrome. Yes, this did get 1 Dead Last vote, but it also got 5 number 1 rankings, so it's pretty well loved, and one of those number 1 rankings was from me. And yeah, there's no getting around it. From the moment that I said that let's do a Cronenberg list, I knew that this would be my number 1. I rewatched all of the other movies to see if it would change my mind, but nope, it didn't. I still feel the same. I just think that this is a perfect culmination of his particular brand of filmmaking. It perfectly balances and encapsulates his style. It's this weird, horny, subversive body horror film, but then it also has a message behind it, and it does have a plot. I feel like some of Cronenberg's movies have the tendency to ramble around a little bit, but not here. This is very concise, and also, wow, very prophetic. This movie saw where we were headed, and now we're there. We're in Videodrome. So I guess long live the new flesh. You've got this pretty high up there as well. You've got it in 2nd place.
There it is, right back there. I love Videodrome. And for a long time, like I said about Dead Ringers, if you made this list at any other random time, I probably would have had Videodrome at my number 1 spot. I mean, it's the quintessential David Cronenberg movie, right? Like, does it get more Cronenberg-y than taking a weird pulsating Betamax videotape and shoving it into James Woods's like stomach vagina? Like, I don't know. I don't think so. If I had to rank this on memory, I probably would have had Videodrome, I don't know, like way lower on the list, right? Because you gave me the list. You're like, oh, these are the movies we're actually going to cover. and I kind of just throw them in an order, right? Like just off of memory. I'll do that with any of the dead lasts. And I think I did. I threw Videodrome like, I don't know, it was like 6 or 7 or maybe 5 or something like that. I was like, okay. And then I put it on again to watch it, and I was like, what was I thinking? Why would I ever put Videodrome this low? I love Videodrome. Come on, man. James Woods is such a sleazy, and I was like, and it was just like a memory like flood back where I was just like, yeah, like you just haven't watched this in a while. You love this movie. Are you on drugs? Yeah, for sure. It's Videodrome. Get real.
So that only leaves one movie, and it's our number one. That's right, coming in at number one, should be no surprise. It's the one that I figured would get the top spot, and with 62 points, it's The Fly. Now, I figured this would win, but I confess that I didn't think it would be as tough of a competition as it was. It started off in 4th place, and with each ranking that I received, it climbed a little further up. At the deadline for rankings, it was only in 1st place by 1 point, but then at the last minute, I got a bunch of rankings placing it pretty high up, and it sealed its place. The worst score that this one got was 7th, and it snagged the top spot 9 times, but oddly enough, none of those came from us, although we put it pretty high. You had this one in 3rd, and on that list, that still means that there's a lot of love.
I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it is his finest film. Like, it's like almost The Fly is almost a perfect movie. And I definitely think it is. I think it's the finest remake ever made. It is the perfect thing where you take an old idea and you just infuse it with new filmmaking techniques and new ideas while still maintaining exactly what's going on in the original. Because I love the original Fly. I think it's a really fun 50s sci-fi picture. But this is the perfect modernization of that story. And the effects are just killer, man. Chris Walas does such an amazing job. Like, every time Goldblum's on screen, I think he's got a different thing going on, man. And it's just like, it's repulsive. You can't look away. And it's it's an amazing feat of special effects. It's not why it's my personal number one, but man, I love this movie. I love The Fly. The Fly's fantastic. And you should all be proud that you chose The Fly. That's number one.
Well, I didn't choose it as my number one because I had it in 2nd, but I am not mad that it's number one because it's a damn masterpiece. This movie is so well crafted because at its heart, it's a character piece. It's a slow, literal disintegration of a man. But there's also that other level, that metaphoric aspect, because this was intended to be an exploration of disease. And I don't know if it was directly intended to be about the AIDS epidemic. Like, I don't know if Cronenberg sat down and said, this is about AIDS. Or if he just intended it to be about sickness and then things lined up that way. But either way, it's a chilling depiction. And the thing that sets this apart from just your standard horror tale is the characters, since you're solidly invested in all of these people. Like, even Creepy Stathis, who you just kind of hate throughout the film, because he's like breaking into Ronnie's apartment and using her shower and being a sleaze in general, and yet by the end, you're kind of rooting for him. Not because he redeemed himself, but because of the circumstances, and it's just great. This is such a great film, and it's so many things. It's a body horror story that's right up Cronenberg's alley, and it's a remake, and it's a love story, and it works on every level, and it deserves to be number one.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
So there you have it, the early works of David Cronenberg ranked and rated, and I have no problem with this roster. Let's take a look at this ranking, and yeah, the thing with this list is that I like all of these movies, so I'm kind of cool with pretty much any order that they're in. You could just scramble up this whole thing, and I think that I would still be like, oh yeah, that's a good roster too. These are all pretty cool films that you guys should check out, and if you have, and if you agree, let us know down below. Put your ranking down there. Let us see how you'd place these. And if you've never seen any Cronenberg films and now want to check them out, shout that out as well. And of course, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I also want to take this time to thank all of my patrons, every single one, whether you choose to participate in ranking or not. You are appreciated. And I also want to thank, of course, thank you, my special guest, Derek. Thank you for coming on and talking about these movies with me.
No problem. I'll come on anybody's show and talk about David Cronenberg movies. I feel like I didn't say half of what needs to be said about a David Cronenberg movie. So if you also make a show and need someone to talk about David Cronenberg movies, I can come on there and talk to you about David Cronenberg. You out there watching this program, there's 11 movies. If you haven't seen all 11 of these movies, go watch all 11 of these movies because they're all good. And I felt bad putting any of them in an order, like, right? Like, I don't know. I just felt bad putting any one of them above another because they're all great for different reasons. And it's just whatever you prefer, whatever speaks to you personally. Sometimes that's Crash. Sometimes it's The Brood, though.
Well, whether you're having a Crash moment, a Brood moment, or any in between, thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys shortly for another great video. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.